Hey everyone, as a disclaimer, this copy of Spider-Man 2 for the PS5 was provided to me by Sony, but all views and review and opinions are of my own. They are not influenced by the fact that this was gifted to me as a review by Sony. I hope you enjoy my review of Spider-Man 2. So, Spider-Man 2 is the third game in Insomniac Games series. Yes, third, as we have the original Spider-Man and Miles Morales before this. Miles Morales being a sequel to the original Spider-Man. For clarity purposes, I did check out the quality mode and it looked amazing, but opted to play the game on performance for the 60 FPS gameplay, so all the footage that you're going to be seeing in this review is on performance mode only. I want to start by saying I played the original Spider-Man and Miles Morales, but not to completion. So Spider-Man 2 is the first game I did complete in the series. Not because they were bad games, just simply because I started them and then just got distracted with something else and I just didn't have time. But it has encouraged me to go back and complete the other previous two. That's a testament to Spider-Man 2 in itself. I have very much enjoyed my time with Spider-Man 2, despite the bugs and issues which I will get to later in the review. Unlike the original Spider-Man and Miles Morales games, Spider-Man 2 combines the two heroes into one game. In fact, there are specific missions that only Peter can do, and some that only Miles can do. These actually make a lot of sense as they are character specific in terms of their individual story, but the combination of the two keeps the game not only fresh, but flowing, and the switch between the characters is insanely fast when you're just in the open world. Mary Jane's missions, who I'm going to be referring to as MJ from here on out, make a comeback, but even these I really enjoyed. From what I'm told, they are a massive step up from the previous games, especially considering you can actually take out enemies. So this review is going to be broken up into multiple sections, the first being graphics and performance. All will be timestamped in the timeline. So let's talk about the graphics. Spider-Man 2 boasts incredible looking visuals. Sure, there are repeated assets like cars and building textures, but if you're not looking for these specifically, you'll not even notice them as you swing through New York and Brooklyn. The characters, motion captured, cutscenes, and the cinematic scenes are of some of the highest quality you'll see. However, as a trade-off, you get very little interaction during these action sequences and are limited to basic QTE prompts. I know many don't like this, but at the same time, you are rewarded with an amazing action scene, which pushes the graphical fidelity really high, and if you're playing on that high fidelity mode, it pushes it even higher as you enjoy the action on screen. It's a true spectacle to watch. Overall, from the swinging to the animations to the gliding, there wasn't a single time I wasn't impressed with the way the game presented itself. I do wish there was a night and day cycle in the game to better utilize what's actually being displayed. I feel some of the sunrises and dawns could have actually helped elevate what we're actually seeing, but unfortunately there is no day and night cycle in the game. But alas, maybe we will see that in Spider-Man 3. Performance-wise, for me, it never dropped below 60 from what I saw, except maybe in one area if memory serves right, but that was just a fleeting moment. I think I noticed it just dropped for a split second, and then it just went back up to 60. But other than that, it was perfect. It was a flawless execution in performance, and what Insomniac Games have done here is truly remarkable. From the attention to detail on the Spidey suits, to the characters, to the surroundings, especially during the cutscenes or the cinematic scenes where it becomes on the rails, is truly outstanding and something you really want to experience. Having experienced it in performance mode, I can only just visualize how good it must have looked in quality mode, because that's when the textures really pop out, and it makes the world of difference, especially with the ray tracing, which this game actually supports. Gameplay is the next section I'm going to cover. This includes boss battles as well, and this is going to be the biggest section of the review. The general gameplay consists of beating up enemies, then you get a cutscene, into a QTE, onto the next area to fight bad guys. Rinse and repeat. This is typical of all Sony cinematic driven games. Take The Last of Us, you enter an area, clear the mobs, get a cutscene, occasional QTE, rinse and repeat. This is a formula that Sony games have pretty much, especially these cinematic story-driven games, have followed for a long time. It worked for years, I don't ever see them changing, and quite honestly, they don't have to. It works for what they want to deliver, so that really is all that matters. I really do not mind when these, action sequences kick in, and sure, it actually requires you to press the buttons. In actual fact, I'd rather just put the controller down, take the QTE out, and just let me enjoy watching what it is. Because, I mean, the ending to this game was about what? It felt like it was half an hour long, and it was damn good. But, all things being said, even the cinematic sequences that are happening in game, at some point, I think they should just remove the QTE and just let it play out so you can just watch, because it just gives you a much better experience. Of course, then people are going to say, well, that's a movie, it's not a game. That's where the QTE comes in, I guess. But to me, it really didn't make that much of a difference, because when it did break out into these scenes, you actually appreciated the amount of effort that these action scenes were actually displaying, and it was absolutely amazing. That said though, with a few exceptions when my web wasn't being fired for unknown reasons in the open world, I'm not going to call it a bug, but I guess it could be a bug, I really don't know. Swinging about in the open world and running along rooftops, scaling the buildings was a true pleasure. It never felt boring or dull. You just enjoyed every moment as you explored the vast city, regardless of if you was Peter or Miles Morales. Traversal was pretty much the same, but enjoyable all at the same time. As you play the game, you unlock the skill tree, which has 3 trees overall, 1 shared for basic actions and traversal, 1 each for Peter and Miles, specifically for their skills and abilities. You can choose which abilities you want to use, being able to equip up to 4, and can change at any time. Now, in order to unlock these from the skill tree, these are all done via leveling up your character. So the more you level up your character, the more of these skill points you get to unlock the tree. So that's great. You can also equip 4 gadgets to help you out, which can be upgraded for more effectiveness. Unfortunately, unlike your skill tree, which is leveled up through you actually leveling up and getting skill points, these are tied to side quests, which I will go into later, as you need specific currency to unlock them. The combat is what you expect from a Spider-Man game, taken from the Arkham series and improved upon with its own stylish way. The combat feels great when you are facing 1 to 3 mobs, however it falls apart when you have 5 to 10, especially if you add projectile enemies to the mix. It just feels like it wasn't thought out well, and what they wanted you to do was use your burst here, but sadly that wasn't always available. So in that situation, you're kind of trying to complete the encounter, trying to dodge, dive, attack where you can, until your gauge basically filled up to max. As when you died multiple times, the gauge would continue on and it wouldn't actually disappear, so you'd keep that progress from your gauge, and eventually once it came to full, you'd pop it and then that area would become super easy. It's a blemish that I hope that they, fix in Spider-Man 3, because despite the fact that there are, if it was just ground enemies, it probably would have been okay. But mixing in ranged as well, you really can't do anything when there's 4 targets aimed at you at the same time. You can only dodge 1. You can upgrade your health, strength, traversal, and the gadgets, but again, these are tied to the side quests, and this for me was a big negative. At least give some from the main campaign so you can level up some of it playing the main scenario, at least half of it, right? But this is not the case here. Outside of the first 2 upgrades, as one of them you can only upgrade once, out of the 10 possible upgrades that you can do for each section, you need to do the side quests, and this just felt forced bloatware. But again, more on this later. I recommend upgrading your focus bar first thing to level 2. This is an absolute must, as this will be your bread and butter. It is what you use for takedowns, but also what you use for heals, and herein lies my issue with it. The fact that they share the same pool really does hamper you as a player, as you need to heal. Some scenes the game throws so many enemies at you with close range, mid-range and long-range enemies all at the same time. Having the ability to use that takedown and retain the ability to heal would have been so much more desirable, but instead you often find yourself not using that takedown, which instantly takes out an enemy, because you want to retain the ability to heal. This was a big annoyance to me throughout the whole game, sadly, and it never really got better. In the end, I ended up saving, and once I'd cap at 2, then I'd sometimes use one where I knew there was a good chance I wasn't going to need both heals, but ultimately it just felt really, really limiting to what I wanted to do. And honestly, it really just restricted me to a point where it actually really bothered me. Now, we've all seen their fast travel. It's absolutely amazing. I did fast travel into a building once or twice, forcing me to actually fast travel again to get out of it, which was quite funny. But the fast travel was pretty instant. The fast travel itself, however, is locked behind, you guessed it, doing the side quests. So you need to kind of do a set amount of side quests to upgrade your bar to level 2 in order to be able to unlock the side quest for each segment of the area. Again, it's forcing you to do bloatware if you don't want to, but then again, that's the only way you're going to unlock the fast travel. One thing I love Insomniac games for is their instant loading of areas, however. This is brilliant. In Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, this was phenomenal. This was, game-changing. They have perfectly incorporated that here as you go from one terrain to another in the Catwoman chase, or the portaling from realm to realm in Mr. Negative's world. It's just so beautifully done and so seamless. You can't but admire the work that has gone into this to make it what it is. Truly remarkable. Like, you're going through a portal and you can see where it's going to come out because it is that detailed. You just go straight through. It's just instant. It's so seamless. I can't really express how wonderful it is. And the tech that they have using this that was taken from Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is truly remarkable. I wish more games actually incorporated this because it's just so good and seamless that now I expect that from all games, even though we've only seen it now from Insomniac games. Bosses felt good, but the phase delivery for me didn't work. Some bosses had 2 phases, others had 3 phases, others 4. You never really knew how many phases there actually was, however, because there was no indication for this. The Connors combined scene was awesome, as it varied from landscape to landscape and truly was a spectacle, much like the high-speed chases in the river when the hunters arrived. But others stayed in the same arena. You beat a bar, get a CS, then have to beat a full bar again, get another CS, then have to beat another bar and get another CS. You see where I'm going with this. You never know when it's actually going to end. And there's no real change in the actual game dynamics outside of the boss gaining maybe 1 new ability each round. However, there are at least checkpoints on each phase to kind of redeem this, because after you've beat the first bar, you get the cutscene, that there is a checkpoint. So if you actually die, you start from that second phase, not the first phase. Again, this is something that bugged me and may not bug others, but it is something I wanted to mention. Also, the overly scripted nature of the bosses, which I get, many games do, but here was even more so, as you can almost 100% script the whole fight with 1 or 2 variations of attack. Like, for example, with one boss, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to give too many spoilers away, because I want to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. I kind of went into it and I already knew that I'm going to dodge left, dodge right, and then I'm either going to parry or I'm going to dodge again. That was a fixed motion. And then the boss stands in front of you going, "Ah!" Shouting at you, screaming at you, which is basically an indication for you to go and smack him a few times. And then the boss will do exactly the same thing over and over and over again, with a couple of variations scripted throughout the fight. It just felt a bit too scripted. I wouldn't say it was an annoyance more, it just made some of the fights a bit boring because they were so scripted, especially one of the last fights, which probably could do with not being in the game at all. And I'm saying that from a good place and not from a, bad place, because it just really didn't need to be there. Audio. Oh my god, the audio. The audio was nigh on perfect. From the audio used in the game to the right scene and the final battle was a chef's kiss. Insomniac really outdid themselves on this, as if I had to pick one aspect that shined above everything else for me, it would have to be the audio. They also took full advantage of the DualSense controller as well, with conversations, phone calls, rings, or just the sound effects. I guess the only negative to this is that most people wear headphones nowadays, but that's not the game's fault, that's just something we do, right? Seriously, Spider-Man 2 proves how Sony has innovated the controller, and what many thought was a gimmick, especially in the early days, clearly now is being taken advantage of, and it shows why the DualSense really is the #1 controller out there. It just needs to last a play session now, but maybe the DualSense 2 can fix that? Please, Sony? Maybe a rechargeable battery pack or something, so I don't need to buy a second controller. But that aside, the audio in the game is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. From the sound effects of attacks, from the web swinging, from the vehicles beeping at you, from people talking, the voiceovers, the voice acting, just everything in the game, from the car alarms. It just sounds great. But what stands out the most is the actual ambiance, the music in the game. It's just great. And the track that they chose for the final battle, mind blown. Seriously, I don't think you could have picked a more perfect track. It's really that damn good. So the story I don't want to go over too much because I don't want to provide any spoilers, but I am going to kind of give it like a blanket overlay. The story continues on from where Spider-Man and Miles Morales left off for the most part. The game is split into 2 scenarios, which both Peter and Miles tackle in their own way. You have the Kraven saga and you have the Emily Osborn saga. Kraven's is pretty basic in the sense that he is on the hunt for new prey to challenge him. I have to say, the fact that aircrafts are invading the city, causing havoc, blowing shit up, gunning down all that move, and the local government is not having an iota of care. In fact, you really don't see them at all if memory serves well. But the Kraven saga is pretty much involves him going on the hunt to find anything that can challenge him in a fight and be worthy of the final battle. It doesn't matter if it's a creature or a human or a bug. He just wants the thrill of the battle. This arc takes you through a number of villains, and the story is told extremely well. And Kraven as a antagonist is damn awesome. The way they portrayed him and delivered him is phenomenal. Really, really well done. The second saga is focused around Emily Osborn. Of course, she has already passed away. However, it's focused around her dream of saving the world, which Harry Osborn has taken upon his shoulders to cure diseases so people don't have to suffer no more. This theme continues to the end of the game as it starts to take on a dark and twisted outcome as corruption begins to set in. If you already are playing the game or have seen any promotional material, you only know exactly where this is heading, because part of it is related to how Spider-Man gets his new abilities and extra powers, which again, I'm keeping this as spoiler-free as possible. It's also the underlying plot for the whole game, as terminally ill Harry suddenly makes a full recovery, but at a cost to himself, as you find out later. The character development for Kraven, Peter, Miles, MJ, and the supporting cast is rather good, with them having side quests to further their character development should you choose to want to learn more. The addition of a deaf character actually worked really well. I appreciate it. It was not done as a token, but was implemented perfectly to feel natural and cohesive, something many in the film and game world seem to miss nowadays, yet Insomniac Games captured this perfectly. In fact, there's a side quest where you kind of take the role of a deaf person and your controller acts in a way, the speakers from your controller kind of emulate the sound that a deaf person would hear, kind of muffled, not hearing stuff clearly, just complete muffle. Because being legally deaf doesn't mean that you don't hear anything, it just means that you can't make out any sounds either. But it's just these little touches that Insomniac put into the game that actually worked really, really well. And it didn't feel like it was just put in there for the sake of it. It was done in a tasteful and tactful way that actually, you as the player appreciate. Arguably, one of my favorite scenes in the game is the theme park, where you get to go on rides, play minigames, wear silly outfits, and the, of course, over-the-top cinematics that followed as you are called upon to save all the civilians' children as the roller coaster derails. Insanely good scene, and is one the game delivered perfectly. I mean, this scene was just phenomenal. It's also where the story takes its first true twist and begins to unravel the real plot, and takes a turn for the downward. in terms of like getting darker and darker. Side missions! This is where the game fell flat for me. It had a few really cool side quests. The flame quest makes a welcome return, continuing the story, so it's kind of set the stage for the next game, Spider-Man 3, or maybe a DLC, who knows. A couple that pull on your emotional heartstrings, like the Grandpa quest, but the vast majority is go to a place, activate, defeat an overwhelming large number of enemies, and move on to the next ones. Very repetitive. Even the Mysterio ones, which were varied in objectives, just felt long and overplayed to the point where I never wanted to go into another one again. That said, I did enjoy the picture-taking ones and the plant organization ones. These were actually really well done because they actually provided some lore. They thought went into them. They weren't just, oh, we're going to do this, try and provide another gaming experience like a minigame and this. It just felt, those just felt so out of place. But the plant one, which actually had some backstory into it, and the picture-taking one actually worked really well. And I really appreciate those. But the vast majority were just placeholder beat-up enemies. And, just when you thought the game was done giving you fetch quests, once you get a certain way into the game, they give you even more. And, of course, all your upgrades are tied behind these side quests. It felt like a chore, and I didn't enjoy it. Sadly, however, as the main campaign doesn't give you the upgrade materials, you have no choice but to do these side quests, as they are your only means to upgrading your gadgets and basic stats. So I had to do a few of them in order to upgrade my character a little bit, because I was taking a pounding at some point in the game. I really hope for future games they will change this, at least give you some during the main storyline to help you along. And if you want to get to max, then yeah, sure, go invest in the side quests. But give me enough to at least let me upgrade my character a little bit in terms of just stats. I don't know, it just felt like a really weird decision. This for me probably had to be the biggest letdown for the game, forcing me to do something I didn't want to do, essentially fake padding the game. Bugs! Now, we have all seen the crazy bugs in the game, even the Cube Morales, which is both funny and frustrating all at the same time. But for me, I really didn't encounter many bugs. I have applied the day one patch. I had a few crashes, which was resolved by loading the last checkpoint, because it wasn't crashing to the dashboard, the game would just freeze. The biggest issue I had was the audio desyncing, and this desync would go to system level of my PS5, forcing me to restart the whole machine. This was bad, right? And though I tried to ignore it at the beginning, it got to a point where you just simply couldn't ignore it, and it was happening at crucial points in the game as well, especially like before just as you go to a certain point in the game and it tells you you're about to enter the final chapter of the game. Are you sure you want to continue? Because this is it. There's no going back from here. And that cutscene there is damn important. And I had a complete desync and I had to restart my machine. Thankfully, the PS5 auto resumed where I actually turned it off. And so it continued. But if it didn't, I would have lost that cutscene. And it was a big, it's a big issue for me. That those sorts of things shouldn't be happening. I can get the crashing. I can get the missions bugging out, but that should not be happening at system level. Outside of these, a couple of missions bugged out, as I just mentioned, stopping progression, which again, a load last checkpoint fix, so it wasn't a big deal. Otherwise it was a pretty smooth ride for me. I'm aware certain outfits clip your character, but I mainly stayed in the basic outfits, so this never was an issue for me. For those of you that love the Spider-Cat, the Bodega suit is the one you want, right? To conclude, overall, there isn't much I didn't like about this game. It had a good story, gameplay was fun and exciting to play. The takedowns were awesome, even more so with the duo takedowns. Miles and Peter played different enough combat-wise to always make the game feel fresh, and MJ sequences were added at the right times, I feel, to mix it up where it was needed and done in a tactful way to make it work, rather than just placed there for representation. From the music to the graphics to the controller, what Insomniac Games has delivered here is nothing short of breathtaking. My biggest gripe with the battle system was the focus bar, as takedowns shared the same resource as your heal, and often you ended up not using a takedown because you never know when you would need the heal, especially when the enemies hit so hard. And in a multi-enemy fight of 5 or more, like in the theme park, it really became a nightmare and troublesome. They really should separate this, though I get they wanted to make this a choice for the gamer, just don't. Let them do both There's no harm in that. Make them feel like a superhero. That's what these games are all about, right? You are a superhero. But despite its issues and bugs, the game lasted me about 16 hours. No idea how that person completed this game in 8 hours. They must have skipped all cutscenes, which at that point, why are you even playing the game? I have to say that because I just cannot see how this game can be completed in 8 hours without watching any cutscenes. And of course I completed a few side quests as I stumbled upon them, so maybe 14 hours. And the game never overstayed its welcome, which is good. My verdict up to the Connors fight would have been around an 8 out of 10. But the game from the Connors onwards just explodes and takes you on a ride of your life. And I'm serious, it just continues to get better and better. And just when you thought the game couldn't get any better, it does just that and gets even better. You don't stop smiling. For me, the game, however, just misses that 90 mark. I mean, I could have even given this a 91. The handicapping of the skill upgrades being fully tied behind boring side missions that I don't want to do, the bugs I encountered, especially the audio one happening twice during cutscenes, and the focus bar again restricting my gameplay, push this just below a 9 to an 8.9 out of 10. This is still a must-play game. It's an amazing game, told in an epic way and utilizes the characters from the Spider-Man universe in such a cool way that you can't help but admire and appreciate the work that went into this game. It just needed a bit more polish. If the audio bugs didn't take place and the upgrades, at least some, were provided during the main campaign, it would have easily scored them 90. But the issues just impacted me personally too much. And despite wanting to give it a 90, I really thought hard about what I wanted to give this game after I finished playing it. But the bugs, the restrictions, the limitations, the handicapping, it just didn't feel right. And I really hope for the next game they can actually remove some of these, give it the polish it needs, and then, you know, this game, had it not had the restrictions, not had the handicaps, had given you some of the materials during the main campaign, actually, you know, didn't have the audio desyncing, I can even excuse the crashing and the missions, you know, bugging out. But the desyncing audio also not being there, this would have easily scored the 90. Spider-Man 2 has pushed ahead from the previous games, did more, delivered better, and told a more compassionate story, while all the while making New York feel alive with the few side quests. No, not the Mysterios. Never again. But the few I did really did help shape what I was doing. If you own a PS5, this is a must-buy in my eyes, without a shadow of doubt. And I encourage everyone that has a PS5 to go out and play it. That's my review. Thank you so much for watching my review of Spider-Man 2.